Good morning. Good morning.
Good morning, Jess.
Good morning, Jess.
Good morning.
Hey, Samuel and Lee. Very excited to have you here. Hey, Tammy. Happy to have you back. We'll just give it a minute and let everybody trickle in. We're still missing Dal, and we'll get things rolling. But yeah, happy to have everybody here. I know it's been a crazy week in crypto, and we had this planned beforehand. So I'm excited to hear about what you guys are doing, and then also, have you chime in on the recent developments. But yeah, excited for the conversation.
As are we. Thanks for having us.
Tammy, I'll kick it over to you. How's your week been before we get started? How's it going for you?
It's been a little busy this week, but the week has been great. So, yeah, as you know, I'm a little busy today, but yeah, it's been an interesting one for sure with all the stuff coming out. So, yeah, I'm really excited for today's spaces. And welcome to Lee and Samuel.
Yeah, I could say the emotions in the crypto community are at an all-time high. So forgive us if we're a little bit, my timeline's been, I never tweet so much. I've been on a tweet rampage the past 3 days. But I do see that Dow's here. So we'll go ahead and get started. I'd love to just give you guys a minute to introduce yourself. And Lee, we'll go ahead and get started with you.
Sure. Thanks, Jess. Thanks for having us on. Um, yeah, I run the Texas Blockchain Council. We are a nonprofit trade association working to make Texas a leader in the digital asset industry. And we've passed a couple bills over the last several sessions in Texas. Several years ago, we passed some business law bills pertaining to the UCC. This last session, we had a couple of other bills get passed, including a proof of reserves requirement bill for exchanges and a flare gas mitigation bill for Bitcoin mining. Yeah, other than that, we work with companies ranging from like Coinbase and A16Z to member companies in the Bitcoin mining world, like Riot and Marathon, and also traditional finance and consulting companies like Deloitte and FTI Consulting. So it's a little bit about us.
Love it. Thanks so much for taking time out of your Friday morning to spend it with us. Samuel, you're up. Welcome.
Hey, yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me. Easiest way to say it is just imagine Lee Bratcher, but a Floridian version. So I founded the Florida Blockchain Business Association in late 2017, early 2018. And so we're responsible for all the major legislation you've seen come out of Florida, from MTL reform to actually setting up a cryptocurrency blockchain office within Florida government. And then the most popular bill most recently would be our anti-CBDC bill, and just trying to dictate pro-Bitcoin, pro-Web3 policies for the governor here, who's also a obvious presidential candidate, as well as some other popular Floridians, such as Mayor Suarez. So we just try to talk to all the major players here in the state of Florida, which interestingly enough gets me involved at the national and sometimes international level, which is interesting when you have a Florida focus to go to those levels, but it sure is fun. So happy to be here.
Awesome. Great intro. And Dow, I saw you just came in. So welcome, Dow. How's it going?
Doing great, guys. How's everybody doing? I'm glad to be here. It's going to be a really interesting conversation, especially uh, regarding everything that's been happening this week. Yeah, so I'm looking forward to this one. And I just came back from Dominican Republic. If you need to distress from the crypto industry, you need a tropical island to go to, nice beaches to go to, great cocktails, and really warm people. It's a great place to go. Recommend that.
Thanks, Dow, for being here. But yeah, I mean, even with everything that's happening, like everybody's looking at how do we take action, and a lot of us don't even know like how these different things work. So Lee, I'd love for you to like touch base on some of the initiatives that you're proposing or bringing for legislation in Texas, and get into more details about those.
Happy to. Yeah, most people think that the legislation and the regulatory bodies that matter for the crypto and digital asset industry is exclusively in Washington, D.C. at the federal level, particularly the SEC and the IRS and other agencies. It's actually about half and half. So half relates to the states and half is at the federal level. Depends on what you're talking about. If you're talking about taxes and securities law, then yeah, most of that is at the federal level. If you're talking about other things like business law, uniform commercial code, money transmission licensing, or legislation pertaining to exchanges, a lot of that is actually at the state level. So each state has their own uniform commercial code. It sets the baseline for contracts, for business law. Now, contracts can always supersede the UCC, as any good lawyer will tell you, which I am not a lawyer, but I've heard from several on this matter. So yeah, there's a need to set a precedent amongst the state's uniform commercial codes that you can perfect your security interest in a digital asset through possession of the cryptographic keys. That's a little bit different than most assets, right? Most assets, you'd have to file a UCC1 statement with the state to say, hey, I have a lien against this asset, or to let everybody know if they want to look up and do business with a certain company, or potentially purchase an asset, that there might be a lien against it. That's not necessary in the world of cryptography, where you have a bearer instrument like a digital asset that can, the security interest can be perfected through cryptographic key possession, or through like the majority of cryptographic keys. So if it's a multi-sig, 2 of 3. The other thing that's interesting to think about as far as legislation goes is the money transmission license is also at the state level. And the recent legislation that passed in Texas a couple weeks ago was a bill that will, and it goes into effect September 1st. So it's not into effect yet, but a bill that requires all exchanges that do business in Texas, which pretty much is every exchange that does business in the U.S. Minus Binance US, they would have to file a report with the Texas Department of Banking in order to retain their money transmission license. And that report would require them to demonstrate some proof of reserves and liabilities to the Department of Banking to increase transparency. It also requires the bill requires them not to commingle funds, so they can't commingle house assets with customer funds, except for in some small exceptions related to omnibus accounts. That's more of like a technical situation where the exchange provides some liquidity for transactions in order to increase the speed of transactions. So there are some exceptions, but in general, the kind of practices that we saw at FTX and some other now defunct exchanges, that kind of thing is prohibited. So those are a few of the initiatives that we've been working on. I think as it relates to these recent lawsuits against Coinbase in particular and Binance, is the question of whether or not a state and the attorney general of a state could potentially weigh in on either filing an amicus brief or even something more severe to signal a state's displeasure with the SEC's action. So that's something that I think a lot of states are exploring right now. And, I'm not going to say we're exploring it here in Texas, but we are looking at what it might look like to explore that. Because I think it is time for the states to signal some pretty strong concerns with the politicization, of the SEC over the last several months. So I'll get off my soapbox there, Jess, and let you
No,
direct some questions to Sam
great
too.
stuff. And yeah, I mean, even from now that you explain it from a user perspective, we're all like, oh no, I can't use this exchange. I'm in New York. or I'm here, only certain people can use certain exchanges because I'm guessing the laws are at the state level. And maybe just, an ignorance question, because I just don't know. Like, do you work with other states to bring legislation at a state level? Because even in crypto, I feel like there's so much tribalism and it's like me against you. Like, wouldn't we have a bigger voice, like working together? Or any thoughts about that? And to either one of you guys, just not understanding how it works. Yeah.
Yeah, I'll jump in, and then I'll quickly cede it over to Sam. We do work with different state associations. Sam and I work together quite a bit. We are all part of a kind of a loose coalition or federation of state associations that shares best practices called the U.S. Blockchain Coalition. There's about 40 different state associations in that. Yeah, so I'll let Sam share a little bit more about all this cooperation.
Yeah, I mean, I'm gonna talk maybe more broadly, but the political game, especially in our current age, is completely different, and I think that's important to understand. If you're looking, past the past 2 decades, what we've seen is in general, of course, this is with cryptocurrency and Bitcoin as well, a very inactive Congress or a divided Congress. So what that means is the majority of authority lies with executive branches, and that's either the president or governors, right, around states. Often, because they are the executioners of the law, the judicial branch gets involved as well, and that's where obviously the Supreme Court comes in, or state attorney general's offices. So as far as state policy goes, there's a variety of things that states can do in coordination to come together for a variety of efforts to counteract certain things that the federal government is doing. So, to Lee's point, having different state attorney generals file amicus briefs or maybe participate in certain court initiatives on behalf of certain plaintiffs, so to speak, can be very active and beneficial for certain parties. There's a lot of things that states can do to help set precedent when it comes to state law that certain agencies or companies can use in their court cases, which is why sometimes passing state law, regardless of what the federal law is, can be important, because if you're being sued by the federal government, you can quote state law in your case, right? And then there's the other aspect of, if you get enough states to pass certain types of legislation, you essentially force the federal government, if this is your mission, to extract political capital to then start suing different states over certain issues, right? Which is definitely a strategy that hopefully the Web3 blockchain crypto community starts taking more seriously. And so I think people underestimate a lot of times in crypto specifically how much you can do at a state level, regardless of whether it's in your quote unquote state's authority or not. Uh, Other political sectors understand that, and you see that act out all the time. And so I think the crypto community is waking up to that and how much power and influence we can have here at the state level.
Awesome. Thanks for that explanation. And before I throw it over to Dow or Tammy, I'd love for you to talk about some of the specifics of either policies or legislations that the Florida Blockchain Business Association has been working on.
Yeah, so the kind of to piggyback off what I just said, probably the most important thing would be our anti-CBDC bill, right? So some of the larger conversations or bigger comments that I will get is, does a state have the authority to ban a central bank digital currency, which is a very interesting question. One of the most fun things that I like to point people to is immigration law, for example. So, under federal law, are sanctuary cities, for example, actually allowed? I would argue that they're not. However, during the previous administration, you essentially had a war for 4 years over the federal government saying these cities are breaking the law, and the cities just saying, oh, well, we don't care, right? Now, take that to central bank digital currencies in the state level. right? So what that shows you is the amount of authority or potential authority you can have as not only a city, but as a state, if you're simply willing to use political capital or what I would call willpower to force an action, right? So, say, for example, our anti CBDC law just gets passed, right? The federal government, which I believe is looking to introduce a centralized digital dollar here in at least the next 1 or 2 years, probably before the next presidential election, issues that digital dollar and it comes into conflict with Florida law. As a business in Florida, which we had multiple businesses attend our bill signing, a lot of banks and credit unions, the Florida Bankers Association was there, for example, actually praising the bill. So now they're given the option between obeying state law or obeying federal law, right? More often than not, depending on how those political alliances work. From what I understand in Florida, most of them will side with our governor on that issue. What that means is there will eventually be a lawsuit, right? So that lawsuit could have a could have a variety of outcomes, but the most important thing is as long as you have a governor who's willing to say that's not allowed here in Florida. And if you're a business that plans on implementing that, we're going to come after you. You essentially force the federal government's hand, which, if you have enough states to do that, regardless of the exact policy, because you can essentially ban central bank digital currencies or inhibit them in multiple ways on a state level, not just the way we did here in Florida. Now you're causing the federal government to expend a large amount of political resources to essentially go after these states. So we're trying to take that strategy that we most recently implemented here and say, okay, well, how else can we use that? If we're really willing to be bold enough with certain policies here in the state of Florida, what does that look like? I mean, I think one of the things we're really trying to think about is how can we end discrimination or what I view as discrimination practices against blockchain and cryptocurrency companies with banks? That gets very touchy because obviously you want to have the conversation with the banks about, we don't want to push forward regulation. We don't want to create regulation that becomes overburdensome. But even just 2 days ago, I had a member of ours who we pinpointed to a bank that at the time, and by at the time I mean 2 weeks ago, had told us they were MSB, which is money service business, and cryptocurrency friendly, business friendly. Well, just 3 days ago, they emailed all their customers and said, if you're an MSB or a crypto company, you need to withdraw your funds by the end of the week, right? That tells me that the CEO of that bank got some message, most likely from some entity essentially threatening them to do so. You normally don't see that kind of turnaround activity that quickly, especially when just last month, this exact same bank was actually promoting that they would be taking in all the businesses that Silvergate and Signature lost, right? So that's probably one of the policies that we're really trying to figure out something to do about. In practicality, of course, you're quote unquote still limited as a state, but like I said, that doesn't mean you can't start creating precedent and initiatives to essentially force the federal government's hand. So it all depends on how aggressive you want to be. I'm in this interesting spot, and I'll end with this comment. Whereas my governor is running for president, that means either way, it's a win-win for me. If he wins the presidency, that gives our association more influence. If he loses the presidency, well, he's still my governor for 3 more years, right? But that also means that any bill that he's going to pass in the next legislative session, which is January to February, now becomes a presidential talking point. So we're also really trying to strategically think about what we're going to be pushing based on that narrative.
Love that. Thanks so much for sharing that with us. And yeah, it's a lot to take in because we don't see everything that happens behind the scenes and the work that you guys put in to get these things to get signed. But I'd love to throw it over to Dow or Tammy to see if they have any comments or questions.
Yeah, really love this space because I think it's time for crypto in general to get political. So I think we need to have more of this conversation. And the big context, because I agree with you, Jess. I think sometimes this conversation are a bit complex, right? If you're not that familiar with how things work at the government level, but at least we're not having this conversation about what the government is doing X, Y, Z, right? Like just hearing from these guys, you can tell that there's actually a lot of decentralization within the American institution, right? And there was a segment from Kathy Wood, I think, on CNBC earlier this morning, and she was basically breaking down, I think, what Samuel was touching on a few minutes ago, which is that the SEC is really part of the executive branch, but as we know, there's other branches, right? There's the judicial branch, there's the legislative branch, and it seems that there isn't this like coordination across all the different institutions, and even less when we talk about the state level. So there's a lot of checks and balances in the American institutions, and it seems, at least from maybe I'm a bit biased, but from what I'm reading, that there's a it seems like the SEC has kind of reached its limit in terms of trying to impose its vision for crypto in the United States, and there's starting to be some pushback not just from the crypto industry but actually from other parts of the government. So to me that's really positive, even though like the news was negative. It seems it's actually like a the start of a pushback. So I'd love to kind of hear your take on, because I understand that we can definitely do things at a state level, but the idea, and I think that was from Ryan Selkis, of really getting more political and starting to have a bigger voice through lobbying and having super PACs, and really coordinating efforts to have a coordinated message when we talk to different parties and when we talk to different institutions within the American government. Is that something that you think is maybe like one of the answers that we need to really focus on? And as just a regular crypto person that might be an American citizen, is there something that I can do to push those efforts?
Lee, do you want to take that one?
Sure. Yeah, the lowest hanging fruit is to join even just the mailing list of a state association in the state in which you live. So 40 state associations across the country covering the largest, most populous states. I mean, I don't think we have one in North Dakota, but I would doubt that anybody on this space, maybe there's one or two here from North Dakota. But so there is going to be a state association in your state. Um, the lowest hanging fruit is join the state association mailing list, get involved. Voters or elected officials respond to three things, and three things give us influence and power in politics: money, members, and passion. And by money, I mean ability to direct political spending, make donations, solve collective action problems with financial resources. Members is pretty self-explanatory. That's just the number of people, the number of potential voters that you can bring into the field. And then passion is the level at which your members are excited about your activity. So, Mothers Against Drunk Driving is a powerful um, organization in politics, not because they have a lot of money or members, but because they have a lot of passion. And the digital asset ecosystem has the potential to have all three: money, passion, and members or numbers. But we're so disjointed, and we eat our own. We're so tribalistic that we're squandering the opportunity to exert that level of influence. And I think we could have the same level of influence that the most powerful industry associations in DC have, like the NRA or the AARP, the American Associations of Retired Persons. There is that level of influence to be had if we could work together. So I think, getting involved at the local level is really important, because getting involved at the federal level is a daunting task. In order to get influence at the federal level, you have to have influence at the local level, because all politics is local. Those congressmen and congresswomen and senators have districts that they represent, and those districts are several 100,000 people, and um, you can make a big difference at the local level at a city council, that within one of those districts with a county judge. So yeah, I would say get involved with local politics, like ultra local, block walking, making calls, And it's pretty easy when you get involved with the state association. They can give you scripts. They can tell you who to call, they can give you a script on what to say. Of course, this is decentralized, right? So you can say whatever you want. But if you want some talking points, they can give it to you. And just equip you with the tools to exert the maximum amount of influence. And if enough people do that and take the time to do that, then elected officials are really going to listen, because a lot of these races are decided by hundreds of votes. Of course, the presidential election is decided by millions of votes, but a congressional race is often decided by hundreds or thousands of votes at most. So all politics is local. That's my 2 cents.
And I have one more question for you, Lee. I know Samuel touched on it for a moment about anti-CBDCs. I mean, you talk to anybody who's deep in crypto, like myself, my conspiracy would be, this is an attack on crypto to lead us into CBDCs. So what is your take on CBDCs, and what are you guys doing in Texas to make sure that this does not happen?
Yeah, we have a pretty easy road in Texas to be anti-CBDC. Most of the elected officials here, if not all of them, are anti, and it's a slam dunk for us. We can come in and say, "Hey, we are the industry association that will show you how and educate you as an elected official on how to get your anti-CBDC talking points together." And so Sam is doing that in Florida. We're doing that in Texas. Um, I would say most state associations. I don't know any state association that's like ultra pro CBDC out of the 40 that we work with. So we're in a good spot there. Like, for example, I was in a meeting with some high-ranking Texas elected officials recently. A colleague and I were, and the conversation was supposed to be about Bitcoin mining and other digital asset legislation. And very quickly, it was turned to, okay, how do we be anti-CBDC? And that's really one of what was on the top of their mind as far as all this goes. So I think we've got a winning issue there. I think Americans, while they may not know yet how they feel about the digital asset industry, um, we have a vast majority that are against CBDCs.
I wanted
Go ahead,
oh,
Tammy. Go
I'm
ahead.
sorry, Jess. No, there's a little lull, so I wanted to add to that. And listening to Samuel and Lee both talk about that, with me spending over 20 years in the banking industry before obviously getting into this, I can totally see even what Samuel is saying when, you do have financial institutions that are saying, hey, we'll take this on and wanting to do these things and basically, getting the slap down where something has happened and they have to like switch gears and say, okay, no, and it comes down from the top that no, this can't happen. So even me diving a little bit more into the CBDCs, I can see where there can be a conflict there. There can be a conflict of interest. So just looking into it, I think what your typical customers or coming from credit union world, your members, they're going to be like, okay, well, I'm going to trust this one because obviously it's attached to my financial institution. But I do really feel that there is a conflict there. So I find it very interesting with the anti-CBDC bills or what you're trying to put in place. I think it's great.
Completely agree. And I think Dow made an interesting point. Here we've been running this show since September of 2021 weekly. And, we try to stay away from politics in this space because it is a very divisive topic. But it's like, I don't think it's something we can ignore, especially with what's going on in crypto. So maybe I'll throw this over to Sam. Is there, so how does, with the elections coming up, does that change how aggressive you are in presenting legislations? Like, what is going to change now that election year is coming up for either, the Florida Business Blockchain Association or the Texas Blockchain Association?
Yeah, great question. So I'll give you an example. In 2020, we were incredibly active in our elections. We had probably over $250,000 donated to pro crypto candidates around the state of Florida. I have an initiative called Community Leaders within my association These are essentially people who just run local Web3 or Bitcoin meetups. To Lee's exact point, what we do with these people is I say, here's the roster of politicians within your district. Here are the talking points you need to give them, whether that's on legislation or just introductions. Now go and set up those meetings. Legislators are more often than not much more likely to meet with someone within their district. And so that's kind of a hack we use here where actually they're required to do so. It looks incredibly bad if they don't. So one of the first things you'll get is an email from a legislative assistant saying, hey, give me your address, because they're checking to see what district you live in. If you're in their district, then they need to meet with you. So if you put together that Florida has, let's say over 15 to 20 different meetup groups in this space, and collectively, we'll say there's over 5,000 members in those collective meetups, that means I have a lot of access to a lot of meetings throughout the state. Give those people the correct talking points, and you really begin to build influence around the issues that you want. So the next election, I think it doesn't necessarily change things for me and what we've already been doing here. I think a lot of people in the space are finally waking up to the need to be politically involved. The biggest question will always be building coalitions and what are your strategic plans. So for example, one thing I always tell people is for the average American and even for a lot of people in our space, crypto and Bitcoin may not be your top 5 voting issue, right? Most people, their top 5 voting issues might be the more controversial ones, right? It might be healthcare, it might be abortion, it might be immigration. And so you have to sometimes struggle personally with the idea of, well, here's a candidate who's very pro this, but anti this. Which one do I pick? And how do you build coalitions around that? I think, at least in the crypto community, we can all somewhat agree that Gensler's not a great guy, and neither is Elizabeth Warren. Elizabeth Warren is a Democrat, but not all Democrats are like Elizabeth Warren, right? So if your focus is to, say, for example, get rid of Elizabeth Warren, that either looks like putting resources to primary her or funding her Republican opponent if that ever comes to be. Now, if you're not a Republican and you don't like Republicans, you have to figure out the political math yourself and say, okay, well, is one extra Republican worth getting rid of someone like Elizabeth Warren who's trying to kill my industry? And that's a tough question for a lot of people to answer, but it's a realistic question that you always have to ask yourself. I think what we're still trying to do, to some of Lee's points earlier, is we largely have an industry that politically, on an organizational level, is very, very bad, because a lot of us like to infight. I mean, I'm watching right now and I just find it quite pathetic how a lot of people are celebrating that Coinbase and Binance.us are being sued by the SEC. Okay, you can absolutely hate Coinbase. You can actually absolutely hate Binance.us. That's okay. But if they lose those lawsuits, I don't care if your only investment is Bitcoin. That just means that they can dedicate more political capital to focusing on you than everybody else. And that's how politics works. You have to coalition build. If you're not going to coalition build and you go with this lone wolf mindset, frankly, that's why where we are today. Had we been doing the coalition building that we're doing today 5 years ago, I think we would have had the political infrastructure to stop a lot of what we're seeing. So we're very behind the game. If we don't figure this out now and figure out, okay, maybe I hate X, Y, and Z, but we have the same enemy. If we can't get that kind of logic together, we're going to be politically behind. And you see that happen at a geopolitical level. You have countries all the time who hate each other, who work together to achieve a certain goal, and then they go back to hating each other. That's okay. We can hate each other and still hate someone else more, right? You just have to figure out what the political incentives are, and if you're willing to get on board with that. And that's what we as an industry really need to take time to figure out.
Completely agree. Lee, did you have any thoughts about that, about how crypto will have an impact on the political elections? And then I'd also love for you to chime in on maybe some current legislations that you'd like to highlight that you are working on.
Yeah, we did a survey of voters in Texas recently. Well, actually, I can't say recently, it was about a year ago. But this survey demonstrated or showed that, and by the way, it was not us that did it. We commissioned a professional surveying firm. So there's a 2% margin of error, demonstrated that Texans have a net positive favorability view of crypto by a margin of a +8. So 8 percentage points more are likely to say that they're very favorable or favorable. Now, when you break that down on demographic terms, it was mostly younger people that were, and we know this instinctively, right? But it was mostly younger people, and the older generations were more opposed. So 48% of Texans under the age of 29 own some kind of digital asset, which is a huge number. But 6% of Texans over the age of 65 own a digital asset. So we see a huge generational divide, and unfortunately, the people in the 65 and over are like twice as likely to vote versus the 29 and under. So we need to galvanize more voters in those younger demographics. And what was interesting is it was equally split Republicans and Democrats. Republicans and Democrats are almost equally likely to own digital assets in Texas as someone from the other party. So it wasn't like it was super skewed one side or the other. And what we found is that it's mostly an age thing. It's not political party affiliation. It's not gender. It's not some of these other demographics. It's age, and that makes sense when we're talking about technological adoption. But again, we are behind the eight ball because people that are 65 and over vote just at overwhelmingly greater rates. So political involvement is key, and I think we need to step up the pressure as thought leaders in the digital asset space to our followers to vote. And before election day, it starts like in the primaries, right? You go block walking in a primary for an elected candidate that will support your industry. That means like 10 times more to show up. They see your face. You're like one of 10 people that help show up for one of their block walking Saturdays. And you get to chat with them for a little bit. And then you go knock on some doors and tell people that they should vote for this person because this is why you're volunteering your time. And then you help them get through their primary. And then you galvanize more digital asset voters. And then you step up the pressure on election day for them to make sure that they get out and go vote. That's really what's going to set us apart as an industry. That's how we motivate those numbers and that passion to actually give us influence rather than just a lot of Twitter likes and follows. I see people on Twitter. It's so much more convenient just to send out a tweet than it is to spend an hour and a half block walking on some Saturday. But I'll tell you that hour and a half with 10 people with that one candidate, they will never forget that. So it's powerful.
Love that. That's very interesting, the stats that you gave. And what's disappointing when you say, 65 and over, that's like half of the people that are elected officials. Nothing against ageism, but, it's the truth, right? So the fact that they're the ones with the final say and, in that range just says everything. But I do see Matt has his hand up, and we have a couple other speakers, so I'll let them see if they have any questions or comments. Good morning, Matt.
Hey, what's up, guys? What's up? Lee, you said something very interesting, and that's why my hand shot up. What you said about like if they just vote, they come out and vote in larger numbers, and I feel like with the younger demographic, they think things just happen. Like crypto adoption is just gonna happen. They don't. A lot of people don't understand like the legalities and the regulatory framework behind putting things in power for it to go up for a vote to actually be introduced into law for it to be actually regulated and enforced. And I always use this example. A couple years back, my neighborhood was gonna increase like a surcharge on on the trash collection in our neighborhood. And they said, hey, if you want to come vote on this issue, like here's where the city council meeting is gonna be had, and you can say your vote. Four people showed up, and I'm sitting there, and it was like me and like three other people, and we're voting for literally like thousands of families for this trash increase. And four of us, it was me and like two, like these two old ladies, and like this one other guy. And I'm just sitting there like really sitting back like, wow, they're going to give like us four power. Well, not power, but like literally like this is something thousands of families are going to be paying for, and just four of us in this like empty room talking to the city council about this trash collection increase. And I feel like a lot of the laws in our country happen exactly like that. A lot of important laws and stuff that we could be voting on, and the younger demographic doesn't realize that's how things really happen. And I wish that changes to some degree. I wish more people do go out and vote, because yeah, to your point, it is easier to retweet than get up and go out and go actually stand in line and vote. So yeah, I totally agree with that.
Thanks, Matt. Go ahead, Lee.
Yeah, that was another interesting stat from this data. I alluded to it. Um, it was fascinating to see that young Democrats and young Republicans from both rural and urban and suburban areas were almost um, aligned in their support for the digital asset industry. So it really cut across like all these different subsets that whether it was political party or what have you. And it's just it's there's very few issues that are unifying like that in the say millennial generation, like the sub 40 years old, like anyone from 20 to 40. And I think we really need to use that as a tool to gain a little bit more momentum.
That stat completely makes sense, which is like, I know, the people in this community are split down the political lines, which is probably why we don't talk about politics a lot. Because the one thing that does bring us together is crypto, but it's an all-out attack on both sides. So at some point, like I don't think we could keep on putting it off. I'll let Samuel chime in, and then Joey and Nico. Samuel, did you have anything to chime in on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's just fascinating. I mean, there's definitely, I think if you look at, some of the presidential elections where they're saying we have record turnout, but the record turnout is still very subpar, right? So there's one case to be made where you can say, well, we need to get more people out and voting. But, you always also want to figure out, okay, well, that's also a very heavy lift. It's hard to change people's actions. How can we influence change, maybe on behalf of those people? I mean, frankly, one of the things I tell people is lobbying in its base form exists because the majority of people actually don't have time to consistently talk to representatives and inform them on issues, right? I tell people we're a marketing firm where our clients, instead of customers or businesses, it's government, right? And so if you can't figure out how to essentially get more people to attend these local meetings, that's when you say, okay, well, I'm going to put in the work and I'm going to start talking to all my neighbors and say, I'm going to go on behalf of you, right? I'm going to go on behalf of you. You're going to give me whatever you want to say and I'll go for you. And then when you go to that meeting, you say, hey, my name's Matt, but I represent 2,000 people who have signed this neighborhood petition or whatnot, right? So the one piece of advice I have for anybody is try to work with people's actions and incentives if you can't get them to do something. If they're going to stay at home, fine. Knock on their door and say, I'm going. Can I at least get your opinion on this so I can speak on your behalf?
right? So there's always an alternative. There's always a way to influence these people.
Thanks, Samuel. Appreciate it. And now we'll get through the hands. We do only have 15 more minutes with Lee and Sam, so I do want to make sure you guys keep it to the point and make sure you ask your questions. But Joey, welcome and good morning.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you, Jess. Sam, I noticed you're part of the Florida Blockchain Business Association. I'm also in Florida. I'd love to know, like, you don't have to dox yourself, but what area are you in? Because I'd love to get more involved if possible.
No, yeah, I'm based out of Orlando. I'm in Central
Okay.
Florida. I'm centrally located because I have to travel all over the state. There's multiple ways to get involved. I mean, you can just my email's just sam@fbba.io. That's just our initials. And whether you're a business owner or you're just someone who's passionate, you know, I always get people involved with their local meetup or get them plugged in with what we're doing. So I always try to make sure I have an option, a smorgasbord, so to speak, of ways to get people involved.
Oh, Florida
Awesome.
is in the house. I'm in
Yeah,
Florida, Sam. I'm in
I'm down.
Florida.
Oh, Matt, you're by me. I'm in Sunrise.
Nice.
Awesome.
Yeah, we got the Bright Line down now, so that's in Orlando. So I'll be down that way more often. Don't worry.
I'm so excited for the Bright Line, but that's another topic. Those of you that don't have one, you should be jealous. So I just wanted to comment super quick on what everybody was saying. So I think that there's the biggest struggle I think we're facing right now is a lack of transparency, where, you know, we talk about voting and we talk about, you know, calling and sending emails. But ultimately, I think what we all want is like more access. So whether it's town halls or debates, you know, we talked about this on another space, like everything is so scripted now, right? Like the town hall questions are scripted, the debates are scripted, right? Like I would love more transparency from the candidates on their, you know, what they think, how they feel, their stance, because age matters, but it doesn't matter as much as the knowledge, right? Like if you're 70 and you understand blockchain technology and crypto and the effect it can have long term, I don't care that you're 70, right? But we need more transparency when it comes to like what it is. Do they understand and get it? Because when we have people coming in front of Congress, like I don't know if anybody watched the thing with the CEO of TikTok, like some of the questions that they were asking him, it was like, do you even have a mobile phone? Do you even use a social media app? Right? So like I don't age. I'm a big proponent of, I do think we need term limits. And I think once you get to a certain age in your life, there should some be required cognitive testing that happens. I mean, people are typically forced to retire at 65 from the workforce, but you know, like you get a driver's license at 17, but hey, you're 75, you don't need to take another driving test. I'm sure you're good, right? But I think it's more just transparency when it comes to their knowledge of what they're ruling on.
I can comment on that, but it's going to sound depressing.
I don't think you can depress people here. We're all good, happy people.
After this week, it can't get any worse. Yeah, go ahead.
I mean, in my opinion, you know, things aren't going to get better. Things aren't going to get magically more transparent, no matter what we necessarily want. I think as things become more partisan as well, there's less incentive for people to be more transparent, because frankly, they don't need to be. People will vote no matter what you believe based off of a letter by your name. So your job isn't to necessarily, in my opinion, go, well, how can we make things more transparent? My job is always to say, okay, well, what's the direction we're headed in, and how can I influence things based on that direction? So to your TikTok example, how many of those representatives or congressmen and women actually made those questions? And were those questions actually made to get information, or were they political talking points? More often than not, it's the staffers making these questions. And more often than not, every question is delegated for a gotcha moment. Anytime there's a televised hearing, it's not about the facts. It's about talking points and sound bites that sound good. To Congress's credit, it's no coincidence that, the CEO of TikTok, who was being questioned, was very good at making them look stupid. If you listen to some of the questions, they're actually, in my opinion, not all that stupid. I mean, I saw it, what was it, in 2019 or 2018, about when we were questioning Zuckerberg over Meta. And it was the same thing. Oh my gosh, these people don't understand Meta. Really, these people, a lot of times, they don't necessarily give a shit about the tech. All their angled questions are from the national security perspective, right? And so when that's their perspective, the tech question seems stupid, but that's not always what they're aiming at. So when you know that ahead of time, you have to figure out, okay, if I'm going to have limited transparency, and if every question going to be asked isn't based on a fact, it's based off of a political talking point, how do I structure what I'm doing to make use of that scenario? Sometimes that means you don't need to talk to the congressman, you need to talk to their legislative aides. Sometimes that means you need to frame your talking points in the exact same way they're framing theirs. So you take it from a national security point of view for this specific example, as opposed to a tech point of view, right? I'm all for, I want things to be better. Like, I would love more transparency, but because I view that as not happening, my next goal is to figure out, okay, that's not happening. How can I still remain influential in the process?
Sam, to your point, though, the whole idea about national security, and maybe this is my tinfoil hat, but I feel like they use the guise of national security and protecting the American people as a way for them to just continue to take their slice of the pie and to continue control. I mean, am I the only one that thinks that?
No, what happens is, I 100% agree with you. What makes my job, and I think the American people's job, tough is, and SEC is a great example of this, they will take a case that I think is well-meaning at first and pervert it into something that is incredibly awful. I'm actually, in the very beginning, I was completely for a TikTok ban. I view TikTok not very favorably. However, when you look at the TikTok ban introduced in Congress, it has nothing to do with TikTok at all, right? So here am I, a well-meaning American, thinking of, okay, I see the national security implications of TikTok and being bad. I get it. But then I look at the bill, and the bill is this perverted mess that has nothing to do with what I thought as American was going to help my country, and is in fact just a huge invasion of privacy. So it's kind of the unfortunate reality of our current political world. So you're definitely correct, I think, in everything you're stating.
Thanks for the questions, Joey. And we'll let's keep it going. Johnny, and then Nico, and then NFT 42.
Hey guys, thanks for what you're doing. My question is about the current. I know you guys are state-based, but as things trickle down to the states or up to the federal government, what do you think of the proposed bill around crypto that's currently, I think it's in the House right now, that would kind of create pathways for digital currencies to go from securities to commodities based off certain parameters? Do you have any insights on any of the federal legislation that's in the works?
Lee, would you like to chime in on that?
Yeah, we're very supportive. It is a joint effort from the Congressional Agriculture Committee and the Financial Services Committee that's chaired by Patrick McHenry. And it's a well thought out framework for how this industry should move forward. And unfortunately, from what I have read, it is not retroactive. So there's not going to be, if the bill passes, which is a big if, it's going to have a hard time getting through the Senate, I think, in the near term. But even if it were to pass, we would have a challenge with the SEC case still, because it's not retroactive. But it is the right framework moving forward, and it what I would say is sort of a light at the end of the tunnel for a compromise between some of the potentially legitimate concerns of regulators, and then some of the illegitimate politicized attempts at regulators that they're using some legitimate concerns and using that as a blunt force instrument to kill the whole industry. So I think it's a great compromise. I wouldn't even call it a compromise. It's just a great framework for understanding when an asset that maybe was offered as a Reg D exempt securities offering, and then the underlying asset is sufficiently decentralized to therefore be a commodity, even if the initial offering was a Reg D exempt or a Reg A exempt. So yeah, I'm very supportive, and we're going to push our Texas congressional delegation to be very supportive.
Great question, Johnny, and thanks for answering that. Nico, you're up.
Yeah, I was actually going to chime in earlier. I think Lee said it about how, depending on where you live, on where crypto stands on people's lists. Like, I'm in the middle of New York, and there's no, like, everybody I grew up with, and the majority of people I know personally, they don't give a shit about crypto at all. And it's funny because the one or two that are kind of in it, everybody falls on different politics, everything. You know, you get what I'm saying? Do you know what I mean?
Completely agree. Go ahead, Lee.
Oh, I was just going to say, yeah, I totally get what he's saying.
Yeah. Thanks for chiming in, Nico. We only have a couple minutes, so unless you have a question for them, I'm going to go to NFT 42.
Hi, thanks. Thanks for hosting this space, Jess and Tammy. I think it's timely and very much needed. I just have a question for the speakers, and I think it's kind of a nice way, as you said, you're wrapping up, to give people real action items. But when we're talking about sort of the 40 and under crowd that's typically working, maybe our parents have a limited time, in your opinion, what are the top 3, let's say, ways to support your local or even on a higher level candidate that is pro crypto? Is it donating your time? If so, how? Is it donating your money? To where? I would just really love to understand from your perspective what the most high impact moves would be for us.
Yeah, I'm a parent of 3, so I get the time challenges. The top 3, I'll be quick on this. The top 3, in my opinion, are small dollar donations. Like, candidates actually need small dollar donations. They don't need a few numbers of large donors. They need a lot of small dollar donors. So $25, $50 donations, just something to get out. I'm just not a consequential amount of money, but it's sort of the voting with your feet. And then you're on their mailing list, and they get to qualify for the debate stage because they have X number of smaller dollar donations. That is very helpful. And then you're getting on the mailing list for the local state association so that when the time comes, you can send an email or call a staffer to exert influence. That's a 5-minute, 10-minute ask on time, so that you can just use those 10 minutes very pointedly and to get on the phone with the staffer to express your opinion. You'd be surprised if 20 people call on an issue. It's a big deal for a legislator, where there probably are thousands or hundreds of thousands of people that are interested. It's the people that take that 5 or 10 minutes to make the call, and they know who to call. And that's where the state associations can help with like which staffer to call and all that stuff. And there's probably a couple others that I could say for the third, but I'll let Sam chime in for some of his best practices.
Yeah, I think for a lot of people, get as local as possible if you'd really like to have influence, and then you'll be surprised how much influence that pays off. So, for example, sometimes it's an effort to want to talk to your local congressman and local state representative. I get that. I have actually built great relationships with city commissioners, county commissioners, and in Florida, of course, is a Florida thing, we have like mosquito control elected officials, right? You would be absolutely surprised how much use I have gotten out of local people getting involved with small elections around water, around recycling, and around mosquitoes. And the funny thing is it's all interconnected. You do not need to necessarily always support the mainstream stuff that you're finding. Find what you're passionate about. find the representative, commissioner, city person who's also passionate about that, build a great relationship with them. And by nature, if you can, let them become your Web3 advocate, they will introduce you and make the introductions that you need to get where you need to be. I got a mosquito commissioner to introduce me to this congressman that I was trying to get a hold of for an eternity, who just wouldn't answer our calls. But because they, for some reason, had a great relationship, I was put on a texting thread and it happened right away. It's really that ridiculous sometimes, but it's awesome, right? And mosquito commissioners are fun positions. So who wouldn't want to be involved in that?
I was gonna say, I'm not. I'm gonna make this quick. It's to that point too. What Sam was just saying. About starting local. Everybody wants to talk to the top gun. I get it. I get the enthusiasm, but it's way more effective to talk to the person that talks to the top gun all the time. I was high school friends with this my
Matt, it's 11. You can't go into a
Wait,
store.
let me just say this. It's important. It's adding to the conversation. I'm telling you. I was friends with this girl named Kadeen. Her dad was like a commissioner of like a local city, whatever. It was a small city, but her dad was friends with the mayor of that city. So if I wanted something to happen, I could just talk to her, and then she would talk to the commissioner, and then the commissioner would talk to the mayor. So it's like I feel like everybody tries to go to the main candidate. Like find out who the staffer is. Make friends with the staffer. The staffer is talking to the person all the time. So if you want you want to raise an issue, talk to the staffer that talks to the main guy. So yeah.
Great point. I just want to be respectful of Lee and Samuel's time. We'll keep the conversation going for the second part of the show. But before we let them go, because I know they're busy, I do want to give you guys just to say any last word. And I'd also love to connect with you guys. Maybe you guys can send me something of how we can take action. And I'd love to put that out for the Twitter community to see, some call of action. I'll throw it over to Sam and then Lee.
Yeah, one, obviously, I really appreciate you guys having this space and having us on. I mean, stuff like this is one of the best ways that you can just take action because not a lot of people know. And a lot of people, you see what the SEC is doing, and you're just disillusioned and disheartened, which is sometimes what they want. Because if you are disillusioned, you're not going to do anything. But you will always have options. And it doesn't mean that you have to be talking to someone like Gensler to have an option. It means that all you need to do is sometimes look at your most local positions, build relationships with them. And over time, that is some of the best ROI you will ever get, not only on the political scene, but you will find out that you as a person, regardless of even crypto, it will be an ROI that pays off in a huge way. So I would always encourage people to get involved locally. There is literally never a disadvantage in doing so.
Thanks, Samuel. We really do appreciate your time. Lee, you're up.
Yeah, I appreciate you guys having us on. It's an important conversation. I would say, yeah, we're hosting a summit in Texas in the fall, and it's going to be a policy-oriented summit. So, would invite everybody to come out there and have conversations. We've had Hester Peirce out there before, Senator Lummis, Senator Cruz. We'll have some Democratic senators this time that come and try to make it a really bipartisan push for a constructive policy conversation. So that's people can find us there, texasblockchaincouncil.org or texasblockchainsummit.org.
Yeah, appreciate it. Make sure to give Sam and Lee a follow and see what they're doing to help us here in the crypto community. Like they said, we sit on Twitter and they're actually out there doing the work. So these are the type of people we need to support. Again, I want to appreciate you guys' time. I know we went over a little bit. We do keep the show going for the second part of the show, but I understand if you guys need to drop off. We really appreciate your time.
Thanks for having us. Yeah, I've got to jump for a meeting at the top of the hour, but this was a lot of fun. And Jess, Tammy, we'll be in touch about how to advocate further.
Yeah,
We'd
thank
be
you
happy
all.
to help.
Yeah, thank you guys.
Yeah, thanks, guys. And just an FYI, we actually had this space scheduled from before everything that happened this week. And it just happened that, a lot of things happen in the industry this week that were not in our favor, but I think it was the right time for the conversation. So definitely appreciate their time. And again,